And we started?
Yep.
Okay, everyone, let's go.
I gotta change this chair.
We're getting close. Well, this is going to be the last portion for the book of Shmos. Next week we're going to do Purim. So even though next week is Vayikra, but next week we're going to do a special class on Purim. All right. So the question we're going to discuss for today, which is on 165 in your books, is how do we educate kids? Do we drip drop or we overwhelm them? Well, that's actually a bad way of putting it. So you're trying to teach your kids about Judaism. There's certain things that they can understand with their young minds, and certain things that are beyond them. The question is later on. The question is, when do we expose this material to them? When do we tell them stuff that's kind of Parshat Pekudei? But we're 165.
No, okay, I got the right page.
You got the right page. You see, you're not a total loss. So should kids be told challenging traditions up front, or should we focus on the fun aspects and addressing the tough topics later? And there are both ways of looking at it. And today we're going to discuss both of them. You have something to say?
Well, I think it has to do with their age and their maturity to handle certain topics.
So the question, so you are on the we're talking about in Judaism, not talking about general.
Judaism.
Well, I think it depends.
Why is Judaism any different from teaching any other subject?
All right. Yeah. So well, over here we're talking about there's some ideas. There are some ideas that are beyond their ability to understand now. Or do we tell them about it? Do we relate to them? All right, here we go. So this week's Torah portion, we read about the actual construction of the Mishkan. Last week was the building. This week it's construction. You know, when Jewish people get together for a construction project, you can't just say, and they did it. It's a whole thing. They constructed it, and then they built it, and then it's a whole it's a whole thing. So the way it worked was like this. The Mishkan was completed. The actual formation or construction of the items. I don't know what the fabrication, was completed on the 25th day of Kislev. Later to become the day of Hanukkah. It says that God, so to speak, paid the 25th day of Kislev back because Hanukkah is rededication. So originally, Moshe came down on Har Sinai in Yom Kippur, which is the 10th of Tishrei. On the 11th of Tishrei, he relays the commandment to the Jewish people. It takes them, what is that, from Cheshvan, Kislev, about 2.5 months to build the Mishkan. And you might be thinking, how do they build so much in such a short time? Well, you're in the desert. You got nothing else to do.
They didn't have any HBO Max.
They didn't have, exactly, nothing to distract them. There's no Instagram to distract them. And you had, thousands of people working at it. So they cracked it out in 2.5 months. But the items lay dormant from the 25th day of Kislev until the 23rd day of Adar. The 23rd day of Adar began what's called the Shiva Simei Muluim, the 7 days of practice. So Hashem taught Moshe everything. Now, who was the Kohen? Aaron. Well, what was Moshe, by the way?
Moshe had to be a Kohen also, but we're thinking matrilineal.
No, but see,
this was the beginning, so that he was assigned. So he had to have been a Yisrael.
Levi.
How could he be a Levi if he wasn't a Kohen?
No, because Levi means you come from the tribe of Levi. Of Levi. Aaron's family was unique. Hashem created a new subspecies in the tribe of Levi. So you have the tribe of Levi, and then God selected a family, which was Aaron and his sons, his 4 sons that lived at that current time. Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, and Isamar. Only those 4 sons. I mean, the grandsons not. Pinchas becomes a Kohen later. The whole story of Cosby and Zimri, that's in the portion of Balak.
So Levi is the only tribe that is definitely linked to one of the patriarchs.
Huh? Why? I'm confused.
I'm thinking something else. I'm thinking Kohen, Levi, Israel. Each tribe.
No, that's not tribe. That's something else.
Each family.
No.
Yeah, each family.
Well,
When you're
Kohen is a
talking-
family. Levi is a tribe. Kohen is a family in the tribe of Levi. Israel are the other 11 tribes.
All the tribes together.
Not all.
No, all except Levi.
All except Levi. Right. So
Okay.
again, Kohen is a subspecialty of Levi.
Okay. They paid extra dues, so.
Exactly. So the first day, we're going to talk about this a little later as well, the first day of actual service was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. For 7 days before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, so it means the 23rd day of Adar, were days of practice. Moshe acted as the Kohen, and Aaron and his sons acted as the regular people. So let's say you're a regular guy, and you're bringing a sacrifice. So you didn't just come into this temple and hand it over and that's it. You participated. So who showed you how to participate? The Kohen. So it was role playing. Moshe played the role of the Kohen. Aaron and his sons played the role of the regular Jew. So we see over here in text number 1 on page 166 something very interesting. Let's see if you can pick it up. During the 7 days of initiation, Moshe erected the tabernacle, performed the service in it, and dismantled it each day. So number 1, I told you, Moshe is the one that performed the service, not Aaron. What's the second unusual thing?
Why they did it every day, why they had to re-erect it every day.
Very good, Larry. That every day Moshe put up the Mishkan, and every day he took it down. Now, if you're paying attention past few weeks, you see that that's not a easy task. That's quite it's quite a hassle.
Yeah, but Moshe didn't do it by himself.
No,
So what? What's the point?
he had help, he had Marty there,
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I guess
Moshe-
it goes pretty quick with two.
Moshe
two
bossed
guys.
Morty bossed someone else. It's always, exactly. Another idea, another unusual concept is if you look at text number 2, and here you really got to pay attention to the order of the verses. If you see here, it says he placed the altar of the burnt offering in front of the tabernacle. So you had the main building. In the Mishkan, it was wood planks covered by material, and the Beis Hamikdash was a building, but the layout was the same. Then you had the copper altar, which was outside the main building, which was in the courtyard. And so do you notice anything weird about the layout, the setup here? Let's see if you can. Let's see if you can pick it up. The difference. What's wrong with these 2 verses? I'll give you a hint. It has something to do with the order. It says he placed the altar and the burnt offering in front of the entrance to the temple, the tent of the meeting. He offered up burnt offerings. In verse 33, he set up the courtyard around the tabernacle and the altar and put up the screen at the entrance of the courtyard. And with this, Moshe completed the work. Yay, nay? Okay, so let me help you.
So
Yeah.
the screen is inside the courtyard.
No, the screen goes around the courtyard. There was a courtyard. The courtyard was 100 by 50 amos. 150 amos. So what doesn't make sense, and here we have a difference between Rashi and the Ramban, Nachmanides, is in verse 29, Moshe burns sacrifice on an altar. And then in verse 33, he puts up the fence. Shouldn't you first put up the fence around the courtyard and then
Makes sense. But
Well,
Who-
it would probably be if the screen was around it, then the people would not see what was going on. They couldn't really participate in a visual.
But I hear what you're saying, but the way it worked was that the screen was around it. Not only that, the screen had to be around it. The way it was set up, it was that in order for the sacrifices to be brought, the screen had to be around it. Otherwise, it was considered outside the temple. What means inside the temple? What means outside the temple? The screen.
The screen.
There's a law that you're not allowed to bring a sacrifice outside the temple. What constitutes outside? The screen. So Moshe
So
here,
the screen was the perimeter.
the border, the perimeter, yeah. So why would Moshe bring the sacrifice and then put up the screen? You don't.
Oh, now you show the picture, so.
Oh, there you go. So here's here on the screen you have the sanctuary. That's not a good picture because there's no ramp. There should be so this is actually a terrible picture because it's really
And
really
why do
bad.
they have Masada in the background?
It's probably supposed to be Mount Sinai, but this should be closer. This should be closer here, and show us this wasn't in the middle. It was more here, and this wash basin should be in the front. You have to wash your hands and feet first, whatever. But the point is that in order for the temple, in order not to be considered an outside sacrifice, the screen had to be there. In fact, if you look at text number 3, the way it worked was, and we're going to read about this, this way down the road. This is in the book of Numbers. First, I have to go through the whole book of Leviticus. But in the book of Numbers, it talks about how they traveled. So there were different families. There were 3 families of Levi: Kahas, Gershom, and Merari. Gershom and Merari carried the walls and the curtains. The family of Kahas carried all the important stuff: the ark and the showbread and the table and the menorah. So the way it worked was that those families, Gershom and Merari, traveled ahead, and when the Jewish people were in the desert, how do they know when to travel, when to stop? Remember this from last year? No?
Well, from the pillar of smoke.
Pillar, well, it wasn't a smoke, it was a cloud. Cloud. The cloud was erect, and when the cloud went horizontal, that was a sign that it was time to stop. So the way it worked, you see this in text number 3, that the families of Gershon and Merari, when the cloud came to rest, they were setting up the tabernacle, and then when the family of Kahas came with the menorah and the ark, everything was set up, and all they had to do was walk in and put everything down, because you're not going to have the ark sitting there waiting. It's not.
The menorah is not showing in that.
But this is the courtyard, the menorah, the table.
There's no entrance gate to get in there.
There is. There's.
No, I've been talking about the screen around it.
There is. It's not a fence. So this is a curtain. This curtain was moved aside. So that's also a curtain that's moved aside. You couldn't see inside. So inside here in the back, you have the Holy of Holies. There's a curtain separating. Then in the front room, you have the Holy, which had the menorah, the table, and the small altar. No one can see inside. So the way it worked was always that everything was fenced in, and then you started the service. But then Moshe goes and he reverses it. Not only that, we see very interesting in this Torah portion. The way Moshe's command, it seems that Moshe's commanded, because if you look at the portion of Teruma and Tetzaveh, Moshe is first commanded on the objects, the ark, and so on, and then he's commanded on the house, the beams, the curtains. Bezalel, if you see in text number 4, Bezalel, who is the head, he was the foreman and the expert, and he said, no. What do you mean? The way the world works is, first you construct the house, and then you bring in the furniture. And Moshe says to him, you were in the shadow of God. Surely this is what God said to me. Indeed, that's how he built it. And So why did Moshe reverse it? So Nachmanides, he says that the fact that verse 29 says that Moshe brought up the offerings, and verse 33 says that there was a screen, he goes back to there's no chronological order in the Torah. Just because it says it that way doesn't mean it happened. He says for sure Moshe screened everything in. And then he brought the sacrifices because this is the problem. You're not allowed to bring a sacrifice outside the temple. That's what Nachmanides says in text number 5. And Moshe obviously know the law, like Tevye in the movie, he complains to God and he says, like the good book says. Then he stops himself. I should tell you what the good book says. You don't know what the good book says, right? So Moshe didn't know the law. Of course, Moshe knew the law. So in review, we have two questions. Number one, it says, why is Moshe bringing sacrifices when the tabernacle is not set up yet? And number two, Jewish law doesn't seem to permit it. Let's do away with the easy thing, the law part. Okay. So the Chassidus explains. So Chassidus explains that the 7 days from the 23rd of Adar to the end of the month until Rosh Chodesh Nisan was different than from Rosh Chodesh Nisan and on. Meaning like this: from 23rd of Adar, those were 7 days of initiation. They had different laws. You can't ask me a question. Did I stop the video, by the way?
No.
Okay, I touched the ear. Afraid because every time I touch the ear. The 23rd of Adar until the end of the month was days of initiation. It had its own law. All the laws of saying that you had to, you can't bring a sacrifice outside the temple, and all that is from when the law starts. When does the law start? When the days of the Mishkan really starts. Do we count those 7 days as anything? No. Proof is Moshe took apart the Mishkan. That is why Moshe took apart the Mishkan every day, because those weren't real days of service. They were just practice. It's like now, spring training.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you
Doesn't
don't
count.
you don't take down the doors, lock everything up, on weekdays.
I know, but if Moshe were to leave it up, it would have been a sign that it's permanent. This is the way things really are. The idea was, it was just practice.
Yeah, it was practice.
Oh, like that.
Well, I know exactly what he means, because when he was in Scouts, we'd always have one weekend where we'd break out all the tents. Everybody would put up a tent, inspect it, make sure it was fine, and then take it back down and put it up. And we weren't going camping that day. It was practice.
Practice. And how do you know? How do you know those 7 days didn't mean anything? Because you look over here on text number 6. This is from this is back on in Shemos. I should say this is in this week's parsha. It says Hashem spoke to Moshe, said, "When should you erect the tent of meeting? On the first day of the month. The first day of the month is the first day of the first month is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. We spoke about this today. How Nisan is considered the first month. Now, in another place in Leviticus chapter 9, Rosh Chodesh Nisan is called the 8th day.
It's what?
It's called the 8th day.
The 8th day.
So it all depends on how you're looking at it. The 8th day for what? The first day for what? So if you're talking about the Kohanim, it was the 8th day because they were practicing for 7 days. And now it's the 8th day. If you're talking about the Mishkan, today's the first day because the other 7 days they were taking it down. It didn't count. So you see in text 7b, Rashi says it was the 8th day for initiation. Where are we? It was the 8th day for initiation, and it was the first day for the Mishkan. And you see over here, it says it in the Parsha. In Parshat Tetzaveh, it talks about the priestly garments and the initiation sacrifices and ceremony. It's in text number 8. It has a whole thing over here. It says, text 35, over there, at the end of text 8, it says, this you should do for Aaron and his sons. For 7 days, you should initiate them. So we have two things over here. We have the Mishkan, and we have the Kohanim. It's interesting, by the way, just to tell you an interesting medrash. Since, Moshe was acted as the Kohen, or the Kohen Gadol, for 7 days. And also, sort of the 8th also. On the 8th day, they sort of overlap. Why? The Medrash says that we find that every time in the Torah that God gets angry, there's something happens as a result, except for one time. This is when God was speaking to Moshe by the burning bush, and Moshe didn't want to go to Egypt. It says God got angry at him. And Moshe said, fine. But we don't find anything happen to Moshe. So the Medrash says something very interesting. Because if you look over there, right after God gets angry, it says, because Moshe says to God, you should send who you really should send, which is Aaron. Aaron was the leader of the Jewish people in Egypt at the time. Moshe's father had passed away. Moshe's father was the leader. Amram was Moshe's father. Aaron was now the leader of the Jewish people in Egypt. So Moshe said, Aaron is already the leader. I'm going to come and, take it away. He's going to be jealous. And, I'm the younger brother. Listen, as youngest in the family, I know what it means to outshine his brothers. You know what I'm saying?
Being the oldest brother.
And the only brother.
Listen, I know my brothers are not going to watch this. I can say whatever I want about them.
What's their email address?
Exactly. So, 2 weeks ago when I was by my nephew's bar mitzvah, someone asked, my brother Penny is a rabbi in Cooper City. He's the oldest, I'm the youngest. So some guy said, I can't believe you guys are brothers. So my brother said, listen, my parents, we're the bookends. We're the successful kids. Everyone in the middle are a bunch of
A bunch of bums.
yeah. So we're holding it all together. So what happened was over there. It says Hashem tells Moshe, says, I know that Aaron the Levite will be happy to see you. So the Medrash says there that now he's a Levi, and he was supposed to be only a Levi. You were supposed to be the Kohen and the leader, but because you refused, Aaron is going to be the Kohen, and you're going to be just a Levi. But because that was in the initial plan, that Moshe should be a Kohen, so he had got a taste of it, at least. Now, by the way, this whole idea ties into a lot of things you should know. When Moshe spoke to God, did he walk into the Holy of Holies? Only a Kohen, Gadol, can walk into the Holy of Holies, right? Where the ark was, only the Kohen Gadol can go in on Yom Kippur. So if you say Moshe is just a Levite, then no, he didn't go in. But if you say Moshe was a Kohen, then he did go in. Not only that, Moshe married Zipporah, right?
Okay.
What's Zipporah's nationality?
Egyptian. No.
No.
Midianite. Midianite.
That's right. She was.
Medellin, but I don't know.
Midianite. She's Midianite.
Okay.
Jethro's daughter.
Jethro.
Yeah.
Jethro.
So she wasn't Jewish, right?
Right.
That's not nice.
So she converted. Is a Kohen allowed to marry a convert?
No.
So, in fact, Korach, Balak, when Zimri, the leader of the tribe, wants to be together with the princess of Midian, her name was Cosby, he goes over to Moshe and says, he asks, can I be with her? He says, no, what are you talking about? She's not Jewish, she's a shiksa. I can be with a Midianite woman, but you can't? So this whole idea is not just a small, interesting message. It ties into a lot of things. Anyway, I don't want to get off we already got off the subject.
Because that's like what I was listening to this morning.
Ira, you just monitor. Still recording? Okay.
Still recording.
So
You're cheating.
the first 7 days. So the first 7 days were for the Kohanim. So the fact that Moshe did it outside didn't make a difference because
It didn't count.
Didn't count.
It was just a barbecue.
Exactly. Yeah. So
You say it when the people brought their sacrifices.
yeah.
The people were standing with their sacrifices outside the screen.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh.
So they couldn't go into the main sanctuary. You had to be present in the.
So you had to be in the courtyard with your sacrifice.
Yeah. You had to be there. You had to be there. There's smicha. They had to do smicha.
Bringing it, you're outside the screen while you're
No.
bringing it.
I'm confused. You bring your sacrifice.
Okay, you have a fence around your house. I'm going to come into your house. I have to go through the fence.
No,
to
but
get
you don't
to
go
your
into my
house.
house. You don't go into my house.
We're gonna go into his backyard.
You're only going into the courtyard. Like we made
But
the.
still, you have to walk through the fence, carrying
Yeah.
whatever you're carrying.
Okay. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
What happens if there's a line?
So that
Hey, take
there
a
was.
number.
You have to wait outside until you get in.
Okay, but the actual ceremony, but the actual service was done inside the courtyard.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. In fact, you're touching on something else, which is also off the subject.
Sorry.
No, but when the Jewish people were when you bring a sacrifice, you have to be present. You can't bring a sacrifice absentee. There's not a mail-in ballot over here. You have to be present. So the rabbis came up with a very big problem. There's daily sacrifices, right? Say in the desert where everyone was there, okay, big deal. But let's say they went into Israel, when they went into Israel. So the tabernacle was in Shiloh, central Israel. The temple was in Jerusalem, southern Israel. Back then, Jerusalem was southern Israel. Back then, Jerusalem was over at Beersheba. Jerusalem, that was already southern Israel. Let's say you are from the land of Issachar, Zevulun, Naphtali, all the way up there. Were you coming down every day to Israel, to the temple?
You couldn't. It was a
It's
couple
impossible.
of days to travel anyway.
Exactly. So that's why the rabbis invented this concept of representatives. They're called maimed. There are people who were elected from every tribe, and they had a shift. They had shifts to I don't know, it was a weekly. I think it was a weekly shift, and they would go represent the Jewish communities. Representatives. That's exactly what they
the
were.
ones that brought the sacrifices.
No, they weren't. The daily sacrifices were brought by the Kohanim. They didn't actually have to bring it. The temple took, but the Jewish community had to be present in the temple. So these guys were representatives of the Jewish community. And by the way, that is where the concept of shul started, because the people living away from the temple thought they're praying and doing a whole service on our behalf. What are we doing? Let's come together in shul. At the time that they're bringing let's gather together. It wasn't shul yet. Let's gather together and pray to God at this time corresponding to the sacrifice. And that's where sort of prayer in a communal place became corresponding to the sacrifices in the temple.
Well, that explains one of the archaeological exhibits at the Israeli Museum where they had a, quote, biblical time shul.
Yeah. Yeah,
It was just a small little thingy-do with places to sit.
Right? Yeah. I just talked. Good.
You're still going.
All right. So we see here in text number 9, it says, Moshe also led the service and brought the communal offerings on the 8th day. The day it was erected. So we see here the different rules. And this is what the Rebbe explains in text number 10. That on the 8th day of the initiation, on the 8th day, I went back here. On the 8th day of initiation was part of the preparatory educational phase of the tabernacle. To make the sanctuary, like the verse says, it was not problematic for the service to begin immediately upon the altar's erection because the rules for educational service are different. The Rebbe says Moshe didn't violate any law because it was education. Okay, great. So we explained that Moshe, the how Moshe didn't break any rules. But the question is why? Why did Moshe do that? Obviously, Moshe did it for a purpose, right? To do something so bizarre, to bring up the sacrifices before the screen was there. So what's going on over here is this is a lesson in education. You guys familiar with the Haskalah movement? Haskalah movement.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Doesn't ring a bell. It's every few hundred years, it's the same idea, just same pig, different lipstick. The Haskalah movement started in Germany. It's called Enlightenment. Started in Germany, spread to cities in Poland, Lithuania, and Hungary, and then it went into Ukraine and Russia. So when they weren't ready for the fight that the Chassidim put up, they thought the Chassidim would roll over and die. They weren't ready for the fight the Chassidim put up. The movement, basically, the idea was to try to change standard Judaism, to keep observance in the home, and outside, act like everyone else. I don't know, maybe it was because to answer the age-old question of anti-Semitism, basically compromise on Jewish ideals. And these guys weren't idiots. A lot of these guys were learned people, and they had ideas. So it found a tremendous amount of appeal to a lot of Jewish communities because, hey, if I can dress like Joe Smith outside, but be Chaim Yankel at home, best of both worlds. The problem was when they met the Hasidic community called their bluff, and it was a big argument. So the story, you're going to learn a lesson from the story. So the story of a guy, his name was Shimon. This Shimon was from a town of Zamut, and he adopted a sneaky way of getting into the Jewish communities. He went to Vilna, and he managed to infiltrate into the Orthodox community. And then he decided the Vilna is the Lithuanians, right? The Litvaks. And he's going to go to the Hasidic community. Who's the head of the Hasidic community? The Alter Rebbe. I guess he didn't know what he was up against. So, but you can't go looking like a bum. So he grew out. He had a beard and payas, right? And he went looking like a rabbi. You come to the town, and you'd get a job as a malamed. Malamed is the town, one of the town's school teachers. This way he can, become ingratiated with the community, and he could influence the minds of the young. So, before we continue with the story, because in the story it references something else that we have to explain. So you remember the whole story where Yaakov, got the blessings, right? And Esav came in. So it says when Esav came in, if you look at text number 11, it says there when Esav says that Yaakov took the blessing. He says Yitzchak sharded a great sharder, and he said, "Who was here before? I ate from his food, and he's going to be blessed." So look at so this 11b is very important to the story here. So Rashi, on the words, and he shuddered, he trembled. Rashi gives two explanations. Number one, he says he was perplexed. He didn't understand what was going on. Number two is Yitzchak saw purgatory open up beneath him. He saw Gehenna. So the plain explanation, pshat, the straight off textual explanation is number one, and Yitzchak was all confused. Number two is Midrash. Back to the story. So Wednesday, this guy, it's actually here in text number 12, you can read the whole story. So on Wednesday, this guy comes, and this guy Shimon, and he has a yechidus, a private audience with the Alter Rebbe. It's interesting how some of these guys thought that you're going to fool, tzaddik. We're going to learn Tanya. So this Shimon writes in his journal, he says, when I entered the Rebbe's chamber, I was struck with fear and awe by the appearance of his face. But I gathered myself, I said, and he asked me, what can I do for you? So he said, I'm an elementary school teacher and I want a job. Rebbe leans forward and he raises his hands and says, let me ask you a question. It says Isaac was trembling. What does it mean? So Shimon answers, it means he was perplexed. The first explanation of Rashi. So Rebbe says, and what about the second explanation of Rashi? That he saw purgatory, Gehenna, open up. So Shimon says, I'm not going to bother here. So in my opinion, one shouldn't fill the pupils' delicate minds with Agada in general, especially with ideas of purgatory. And the pupil will wonder how large and wide opening of Gehenna could fit into Isaac's small room. and it goes a whole thing over there. How Isaac and Esav survived if Gehenna was there. So now the Alter Rebbe asks the Shimon, and how did the Medrash know that Gehenna was there? Where did the Medrash get it from? That Shimon didn't know. So the Rebbe says like this: do you think Yitzchak didn't know that Esav sold the birthright? Did Yitzchak know?
Suspected, probably.
The guy had prophecy. Think he didn't know? He knew. So when Esav entered Isaac's room, continue reading. Here, the Bible, Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" To this, Esav said, I'm your firstborn." This was a lie, for he already sold the birthright to Jacob in a legal sale, and he was very frightened by the lie that attempted to annul a reality that's created by Torah law. That means by a tzaddik. We're learning this. Hello, Ron. By a tzaddik, the Torah is the reality. So here, Yaakov and Esav agreed to a binding Torah law. So because Esav tried to go against the Torah, he was Yitzchak saw Gehenna. So the Rebbe finished speaking, he leaned on his forehead, and he did it before, and he raised his hand, and he says, "It's customary that whenever he receives people, even during the daytime, there are two candles, a chumash and a zayar." He now lifted one of the candles. Alter Rebbe, there were two candles, a chumash and a zayar on the Alter Rebbe's table. Alter Rebbe lifted one of the candles, looked at him, and says, "You came here from Vilna, but you claim to be from Zamud. You convert little children to the avodah zarah, the idolatry of Askala. But you claim to be a Malamed. Because of these lies, purgatory opens beneath you. How many souls have you already destroyed? Yet you continue to betray. It's true, yes, it's true, you're a heretic. Anyone who goes down that road will never return." So Shimon said, I quickly ran out of the room. People didn't realize, the kind of... So putting aside the idea that Shimon was a piece of garbage who was trying to corrupt young minds, was Shimon wrong? This goes back to the first question we asked. We have here two explanations of Rashi. One is that Yitzchak was trembling, was shaking. Another one is the whole thing of Gehenna. Shimon said, let's not expose the kids to this, this great idea. Was Shimon wrong?
Again, I go back to what were the age of the students he was teaching.
No, it's nothing to do with the age. So there are two types of education. There's progressive education and shock treatment. So you look at Rabbi Chil, Yaakov Weinberg writes on page 177, early half of 1900s, first half of 1900s. He says, generally speaking, the first level of practical pedagogy is to establish regular order. Every form of pedagogy seeks to impart knowledge. So how is it achieved? Through repetition, habituation, through daily and hourly measured repetition. That's how it's usually done. The problem is, Yiddishkeit, Judaism, is not just about information. What are we teaching in yeshiva? What are we teaching in Jewish school?
Behaviors.
It's not just information. It's not just behavior. We're trying to instill the kids with what's called in Hebrew Yirah Shamayim, fear of heaven. We're trying to make them appreciate it. It's the Eibishter's Torah. It's God's Torah, meaning there's something higher. It's not just 1 + 1 is 2. Just
Most of the time.
most of the time. Sometimes it's 3. Okay? So in order that the kids should have that extra spice of, they say in Yiddish, Ibrigkeit, given overness to Yiddishkeit, no matter what comes their way, you need to educate and tell them things that are beyond their ken. I was listening to, today while I was working in the office, I was listening to a podcast. There's a nice podcast. It's called Meaningful People. These two Jewish kids interview different people, make impact in the world Jewish community. And so the interview today, actually a classmate of mine, His name is Chaim Danziger. He is Rabbi Shlich in Rostov, Russia. And the shul, the community shul, is the Cantonist shul. You know what a Cantonist is? No?
Singer?
Not a cantor. Cantonist.
Oh, okay.
In the
Sing
18...
everything?
Yeah, everything. In the 1800s, the Russians, but we give a lot of credits for the Germans to be big anti-Semites. But I don't think enough credit is given to the Russians. So the Russians came up with an idea in the 1800s, which is, what we're going to do is we're going to kidnap Jewish kids. Legally, it's not kidnap, if it's legally. We're going to draft Jewish kids into the army. But if you draft them at 18, they're proud Jews. So we're going to draft them when they're 5, 6, 7 years old. And we're going to send them to re-education. What do the Chinese call it when they did it to the Yazidi Muslims? What do they call it? Re-initiation. You know, they
Re-education.
what?
Re-education?
Yeah, I think there's a word for it. The Chinese had
Indoctrination.
right,
Yeah.
until they're 18, and then once they're 18, then they start the mandatory. I think it was 25 years or something. I don't know. Anyway, so these guys got out of the army when they're 45 years old. What do you think they remembered from Judaism? They came to shul. These guys didn't know. These guys didn't know jack diddly squat. So they made their own shul. Interesting. This guy, he says that of all the shuls in Rostov, the only one that survived the pogroms and the Nazis and everything else is this shul. And he said there's a sign on the shul called Soldier's Shul. It's still there. This shul is a very, very old shul. How does a kid who's went to Russian Orthodox re-education program, and 25 years with zero exposure to Judaism, how does he come back to Judaism? You think it's just from repetition and habituation? No, it's because the kid was instilled with something greater than himself. He's holding on to an idea that intellect can't touch. So you can go to him and say whatever you want to say. He's in touch with something greater. By the way, it doesn't mean everyone came back. There were Jewish souls that were lost, that were lost forever. So we're calling this idea that's beyond them. We're calling it tonight shock treatment. Look at what the Rebbe says in text 14a, page 178. He says, although it's important that every child be taught according to the path, we mustn't be content with the limited pedagogy that is common around the world, though this too is consistent with Torah's approach. Rather, our education must also include sacred transcendental content, even if it's beyond the child's current understanding. We must teach the concept of self-sacrifice on occasion. And he continues that this approach produces the desired result that even when they grow old, they do not turn from their teaching. It inspires pupils to be firm, durable, permanent commitment to Judaism. Even when they step out of their home in the environment of holiness, they remain strong and firm in their Judaism. You know, in the book Night, Elie Wiesel says a story of a kid in this town had a question about God. It doesn't say what the question was. Goes to the rabbi. He says the question. The rabbi gives him like a patch. You know, like a little. She says, Rabbi, why did you patch me? He says, so why ruin such a good question with an answer? Meaning, it's okay that you don't understand everything. Because in the world, and especially as Jewish people, you know, let's see what's going on in Israel now. The whole world's telling us that we're the aggressors.
Yeah.
That, you know, the whole world's telling Israel that you have to stop. And you got to do A, B, and C. And you're looking around and saying, you know, it's like, you know, that experiment where the line is clearly crooked and everyone in the room saying straight. You know what I'm talking about? They're done studying. You're looking around and saying, am I crazy or are they crazy? I mean, because it's clearly crooked. Where do you have the fortitude to stand up? If 1 + 1 = 1, I was talking to some guy, I'm not going to say who it is, and he remarked to me, I'm not sure, I think it was after the State of the Union, and he said, because you know Israel and Hamas can't get along, so now the adult in the room has to step in. So I said, do you think the United States is the adult in the room? You think the United States knows what's best for Israel better than Israel? You could disagree with Netanyahu, but you're making a big mistake. When the whole world tells you A, B, and C, so how does a Jew have the fortitude to stand and say, all crazy? I'm right. There's a rabbi told me a story. I heard a story. He told that he's a Litvak, and I don't know what happened to him or what happened to someone else. They were in a town, and there's a few Jews there, and one of the Jews was a Chassidish guy, and they had payas. And the Litvish kid came and home, tells his parents, I want to grow payas too. Meaning, the idea was that the parent instilled such an absoluteness of Judaism that he convinced everyone else that, no, you're wrong, I'm right. So the way to educate is to expose the kid to everything. I mean, in a systematic way. And this is what goes against, going back to that scholar movement. By the way, the scholar movement turned into the reform movement before as a Karaite movement. Like I said, it's the same idea. Compromise on Judaism. Why? In order that the Gentiles might like us, in order to perpetuate Judaism, whatever ideas. So,
Reconstruction.
yeah, because once you
They are way out.
because once you go down the path that the Torah isn't divine, then
Then you're giving up everything.
no, but there's no end. Then there's no. So I was talking to a guy today, and we were speaking about al kosher. So he told me, I told him about the split hooves and the chewed cod, and he starts telling me, yeah, but let me give him my explanation, my interpretation of what that thing means. I cut him off. I said, I don't mean to offend you, but you don't get to have an explanation. Sorry. Just because you're thinking individual, are you an authority? Have you studied it? Have you mastered it? No, be quiet. You can't just decide whatever you want because it makes you feel better. It doesn't work that way. But so being a Jew means you have to be comfortable being different. When you're out there in the street, somebody was telling me recently that he walks home, Shabbos or whatever it is, he takes off his yarmulke. He's afraid. No one should see he's Jewish. I said, being a Jew means you walk with the yarmulke on. This was somewhere, in the safe neighborhood. It wasn't like, it's walking in, I would say Bed-Stuy, but Bed-Stuy is not a bad neighborhood anymore. It used to be.
I
Now,
have been in that neighborhood, and I was one of two white people in that neighborhood.
Where is this?
Bed-Stuyvesant.
Stuyvesant.
Not anymore. Not anymore. I tell you, there's a guy I know. He's my brother's synagogue.
Brooklyn.
My brother's synagogue. He became religious, and he went to study in Yeshiva University. Yeshiva University is in Washington Heights. Not a good, next by Harlem. Not a good neighborhood. I don't know what it is now. So this kid's a Floridian, sweet kid. I didn't know until today. He lands in JFK or LaGuardia, wherever it is. He gets into the taxi. So where are you going? Going to 123rd and Amsterdam, whatever it is. The taxi driver turns around to him and says, "You're going to Washington Heights? All right." That was like his first. He was scared as it is. But being a Jew means you're comfortable with being out there. You sit this out. We never are embarrassed of who we are. Not obnoxious, not rubbing it in your face, but we wear our identity with pride. We don't put our yarmulke in, we take our yarmulke out. That's what, obviously, in this life and death situation, I went to Egypt. We wore baseball caps.
I would say so.
I mean, truth is, even though it was Taba, it wasn't really Egypt. It was Taba.
Well, we've been in Taba. We know what's there.
You know what I'm saying? But those tourist places are not really. Even though they probably were coming from Israel, I don't know what they thought we were hiding. A bunch of guys with beards and Ashkenazic-looking Jews coming from Israel with beards. Yeah.
Taba's got a reputation for having a, shall we say, a nude beach.
We were there for a couple. We were there for a couple. We were there for a couple hours. We just wanted the stamp on. This is 1996. We just wanted a stamp on our
I
passport.
was gonna say.
Yeah, we went to Jordan too. Yeah,
If you're in a line, you can get the Jordan real quick.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we went to
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is why Moshe. This is why Moshe puts up does the sacrifice before the walls are up, to expose the whole idea. That means we never back down from being Jewish. We don't keep Judaism in our home. We don't hide. There was a time you had to hide Judaism. You know, in the Middle Ages. You know, why do we light the menorah inside? The menorah is supposed to be lit outside. Because if you're too proud a Jew in the olden days, especially around December time, you know, and why do we go to a lake for Tashlach? Because we used to go to a well.
Go where?
We,
To a well.
A well.
but actually, it says, if you look in the Code of Jewish Law, it says it's a custom in the first of Rosh Hashanah to go outside of town to a body of water. Why couldn't we go to a body of water inside of town? But because they thought we were poisoning the water.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's also a place of
Without those
congregation.
sins?
huh?
Without those sins, you're taking out of your pocket. to
Yeah,
get rid of it.
I guess the Jews in the Middle Ages were big sinners, you know, they called the Black Faith. But the idea is, I mean, unless we're talking about those extreme times where, you know, you really couldn't be Jewish, but thank God we don't live in those times. We live in a time where you can perform your service outside, be a proud Jew, and don't back. No one's called. And don't back down. This is what the Rebbe says. Look at text number 14c. The Rebbe says like this: we offer sacrifices. What's the idea of a sacrifice? The idea of a sacrifice is is an animal. So you have to sacrifice your animal. You know, animal means your bodily pleasures just for the sake of I want. That's an animal. Animal means I want. Even if we're not in a home that is illuminated permanently, obviously with God's holiness, we also eat sacrificial meat. This represents the idea: a firm commitment to Judaism becomes our food and nourishment. The representation of eating the sacrifice, meaning we internalize the Torah. We remain committed, even if we are in an environment that is spiritually and is not spiritually arid, and is not surrounded by the walls and boundaries of holiness. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying. You got to teach the kids both interpretations of Rashi, the regular one, but also you have to expose the kids to the great stuff. Let's finish off text 15 with the article by Rabbi Aaron Loshek. And he's a writer for Chabad.org and for JLI. And he says like this: many parents take a common practice approach with their children. I don't want to overwhelm them with everything over the top, so I'll leave it to them to discover religion slowly, without pressure. And so they are shielded from anything the parents deem too extreme or fanatic. Teach them some Hebrew, a little about Israel, and ritual about holidays. That's nice. Who doesn't like apples and honey? That's great. But asking them to pray at age 10, not to watch TV on Shabbos, or to really not eat kosher candy, relax, take it easy. Just kids. Let's not scare them off. Like Jackie Mason says, too Jewish. You're forgiven for thinking so. And Moshe teaches us something else. You must buck the common practice and leapfrog a couple steps. Pile it on early without worry. And let me tell you, the kids have more Kabbalah Zayl. Kids have more acceptance of authority than adults do. You tell a kid you can't eat the candy, why? It's not kosher.
Your kids, if you start them early enough, to them it's just a way of life. We don't even question it. You just do it.
And they don't need complex things. You don't do it because of Shabbos. A woman called me up a while ago. She wants the beauty of Shabbos, sitting around. She's having trouble because she likes to go on her phone, watch TV, but then it pulls them away. I said, listen, you gotta make a choice, right? It says, on the contrary, doing so will ensure that even when the walls of whatever holiness have come down, they'll be so strong with values. I think I went too fast. Here, and passion you imbued within them before the walls went up. As it is with children, so it is with us. Who wants to go crazy and bite off more they can chew? You can think to yourself, I got to go slowly, methodically. Says I shouldn't take it out too soon. I was actually talking to Dylan today. Tell him buy tefillin. He tells me, I got this, I got that. Expenses. Buy the tefillin. Buy the tefillin. Don't worry about it. It'll be okay. I'll make a payment plan, whatever it is. Buy the tefillin. When it comes to something holy, you jump in. So you're right and you're wrong. On an average day, you're right, but not every day is an average day. Sometimes you have to take the express train. Don't wait until you build an entire building of Jewish infrastructure before signing on for all-night learning, or getting your own period tefillin, or committing to monthly mikvah visits. Taking the cue from Moses, who offered a sacrifice even before the walls went up. You too can take the plunge right now. You're not ready? That's okay. The Jews weren't ready either. So be like Moses. It'll work for you too. That's what you got to do. You know what's a mitzvah? You do it. You do it. That doesn't mean everything 100 miles an hour, but you take one thing. All right, we're going to do the key points. Sometimes necessary to take a leap in our Judaism. Okay, key points. Moses performed the service on the inauguration day of the Mishkan in what deemed the wrong order. He learned this from other elements. The service to go at that point, namely the educational inauguration stage, things are different. The reason why he specifically changed the order in the educational stage, we sometimes must buck conventional, progressive, pedagogical methods. Don't be afraid to sometimes bite off more than you can chew in areas of religious commitment. Have a good week. Get ready for Purim. Register for Purim. Do Shachmonis. Let's get ready to drink. L'chaim. Is it, the video's off?